I want to be careful in how strong language I use here, but I hate the word tour for our business. I can't stand it. How many of you have ever been on a tour at a museum or a park or something that you thought was really good? Anybody ever been on a tour that you thought was good? Ashley, where was a tour that you enjoyed?
Last week in Italy at this place called Via Valbianeo.
And now we're all envious. Thank you very much, Ashley, for ruining our afternoon. I was in Toronto last week, which isn't bad, but it's not Italy. Okay, thank you very much. Now, out of curiosity, I assume you had a tour guide. What do you think the tour like right before it and the tour after it? For the tour guide, what do you think? Do you think it was the same? Do you think it was completely different? What do you think it was like for them?
Probably pretty similar.
Probably pretty similar. There was a class I taught for about 3 years, and I taught it somewhere between 50 and 70 times. And I used to get a lot of chuckles. It was fun. We had a great time. But I got to tell you, I never even needed to look at my watch. I could tell by the joke I was telling or the thing I was saying. I'd be like, it's 9:15. It's 10:45, because I knew it like the back of my hand. And so it never really changed. And unfortunately, to me, that's what the word tour implies. It implies a sameness. And if that's the way you are approaching your tours for real estate, then I think you're completely missing the opportunity that is at your fingertips. This is, in my opinion, this is the job interview. How many of you in here work on commission? Okay, so this is your job interview. If someone doesn't lease space, regardless of which side of the transaction you're on, guess what? You don't get paid. My dad ran sales teams for years. My dad was a broker in Northern California for 40 years. And he used to say to his agents, he said, if you don't like your earnings, go back over the last few months and add up the number of hours you spent in front of someone who could make a decision about buying, selling, or leasing real estate, and that will explain your earnings. So this is not a tour. This is your at-bat. This is your job interview, and if you don't do it well, guess what? You don't get paid. So that's what we're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so is talking about, how to make the best possible tours. And in order to do that, you've got to back out a little bit and think about this much more holistically. You have to think about everybody and all the processes that are involved in executing the best possible tour. Because when we've gone out and we've talked to tenants, and that's one of the benefits of our practice, is we get to work with people in all facets of this business. We've gone out, and one of the largest series of complaints that we get from tenants goes something like this. We had a great experience with the leasing agent. You know, we're excited to get into this building. They promised us the moon. We feel like this is going to be a fantastic fit for our business. Next, they go on site, the build-out's happening, and they're meeting with the GC, and they're looking, and they go, where are the outlets going to go? And the GC says, what are you talking about? And they said, well, no, we talked with the leasing agent. We want, every 4 feet, we want these outlets that have the USB charging ports. And the GC says, well, who told you were going to do that? Well, the leasing agent did. Well, you can have as many outlets as you want, but they're $200 a piece. So tell me where you want them. Okay? That's experience number one. Then experience number two is that, hey, now they're getting ready to move in. And the property manager calls them 48 hours before move-in and says, by the way, we need your certificate of insurance or you can't show up to the building. And the tenant says, what? No, nobody told us we have to do that. And they said, well, look, here's the way it's going to go. Either we're going to get the certificate of insurance or you can move your move date. Then they're in the property for a couple months and they realize, man, it is hot in here. So they call building engineering and say, can we please get the AC turned up so we can get this down to a livable temperature? And the building engineer comes and says, look, I don't know what to tell you, but this is the hot side of the building. We can crank this AC all day long. This is the hot side of the building. We can crank this all day long. So it's doing the best that it possibly can. That's the next experience. Then all of a sudden a year passes and they get a $25,000 bill from accounting and they go, what's going on? We thought we were going to be flat for the first couple of years. I said, well, read your lease. It wasn't about, we've got expense pass-throughs and we just did reconciliations. And then they notice all of a sudden that things are getting dusty in the office. And they go to the janitor and they say, what's going on? I've noticed under my desk it's not getting cleaned. And they said, well, we decided we wanted to give the landlord the best possible price. And so we decided that we're just going to vacuum the heavy walkways, just the heavy traffic way. We don't do under desks. Has anybody ever known a tenant that's had an experience like this in their building? Raise your hand if you know a tenant that's had experiences like this. Okay, we're not making this stuff up. We didn't make this up. We got this from tenants who said this is what's not right, this is what's broken about it. When you get a leasing assignment, and granted you have to engineer this to fit, maybe it's a Class A marquee type of assignment, maybe it's not, but one thing you've got to decide is, what is our guiding vision as a leasing team? What do we want people's experience to be from start to finish? And there are a variety of companies out there that are driven by a vision. How many of you have ever eaten at a Chick-fil-A? The vast majority of you. For those of you who haven't, it's probably because they're not in your area yet. Is Chick-fil-A the only place to get a chicken sandwich? Can you get a chicken sandwich literally anywhere that sells any type of a sandwich? Talk about a commodity. And yet, Chick-fil-A has a guiding vision from a corporate standpoint to be more than about just selling chicken. And all these brands up here, they have that thing in common. They're clear about what drives them, what motivates them every day. Do you want to have a world-class experience? And so one of the big challenges we make when we're working with groups, and again, this really comes back to, we know that a lot of the modules we're doing here at the school are tops of the waves. We're trying to seed food for thought for you to take back to your teams and your practices. But one of the things that we would do with you in a longer period of time is say, what is your vision for this assignment? What do you want people to come away with as an impression? Because each one of these companies that you see up there is not the only operator in that airspace. So it's not simply that you have a product that is unique that no one's ever heard of. Everybody thinks that's the competitive advantage. But it really isn't. The competitive advantage is in the execution. So you can go back with your teams and do this, especially people who are maybe not as on the front line of sales, although we always say everybody's selling all the time, and you got to remember that everybody that your tenants come and your prospective tenants come into contact with, they're creating an impression. So everybody is selling all the time. But we encourage you to go back with your teams and say, all right, what are the things that we are spending time on that are time wasters, that are unproductive? Talk to your property managers, your building engineers, all of your service providers. And when we're actively serving our tenants, when we're creating an impression on our tenants, what are the things we're doing? How are we servicing them? And what's interesting is that if you start asking the people that are involved in the building, the owner's people, provided that in some of the smaller private client stuff, I know this can be harder to do, and you don't always have as direct access to those people as you'd like to have, but you should be trying to have these conversations, because when they fill out these two lists, they realize this is where I get the most bang for my buck, not only in obtaining new tenants, but in retaining the ones that I have. And everybody has to understand that we are all selling all the time. I'll never understand. So I had a good friend of mine for many years. She used to say, there's no way, I'm not a salesperson. Sales scares me. And then I would watch her when she'd get passionate about something, and I'd say, you're a great salesperson when you believe in what you're selling. But everything creates an impression. So do you have a vision for what it means to be best in class? If you don't, that's where you've got to start. If you are simply a commodity broker out there with 3,000 feet here and 5,000 feet here and 10,000 feet